Okay, we've had a flow of participants joining us, so hello. I thought it'd be nice for you to actually see a person on this webinar to get us started. So my name is Darcy Schofield. I'm a Senior Environmental Planner here at MAPC. Really excited that you have all come to join us today to learn more about our Accelerating Climate Resiliency mini-grant program for municipalities. And so I do have a PowerPoint, and what my hope is today really is to just to provide you with some basic information, give you some examples, but I really do want to spend the majority of this time answering your questions and vetting some potential projects that you might have. So I am going to share my screen. Hopefully so far so good with the technology. If you are having problems hearing me or seeing me, please do chat in the window, and I'll do my best to manage that. And if you can put your phone on mute for the time being, that would be helpful as well. All right. I'm trying to move me. There we go. Okay. So thanks again for joining us. MAPC is very excited to introduce our first ever implementation grant program for accelerating climate resiliency. Okay. I'm having trouble moving my slides. There we go. What we're going to be talking about today, this is my presentation outline, why we're doing this, what some of our program priority areas are, the structure of the mini grant, go over some potential project examples to help stimulate some ideas in case you needed some, and then, like as I mentioned, just love to spend some time really discussing your ideas and what we can do to help. So MAPC received a grant from the Barr Foundation specifically to help municipalities in the Metro Boston region accelerate climate resiliency. Over the last several years, there's been a tremendous amount of awareness and planning around climate change, and we're definitely starting to feel, and Barr's had a lot of feedback that municipalities are really anxious to get some work underway. So our purpose here is to look to start to begin to advance some of these projects. Specifically, key components are implementation of a climate change plan or related planning efforts. Here are some examples. We have a Town of Duxbury Climate Vulnerability Assessment and Action Plan. If you've participated in the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program with the state, this is an opportunity to implement some of your action items. Other planning efforts that might have been related to the state, here's one about designing parks and playgrounds as green infrastructure for stormwater and climate resilience, or even a natural hazard mitigation plan. Some municipalities have master plan efforts that include sustainability sections, and certainly those types of action items related to that would qualify as well. So our intent is this is a mini grant program, so we're not going to be building dikes or raising a large number of roads with this funding, but it is one of those small-scale efforts that we hope to replicate across the region to begin the motion of building more resilience. So we are looking for creative, replicable, and transformative solutions, but the magnitude of the transformation doesn't necessarily have to be significant, just transformative in that you're really accelerating your resiliency action. So we're also looking to address immediate or future risks from flooding, extreme temperatures, sea level rise, or extreme weather events, or if you have other concerns related to climate change, either today or into the projections into the future, we do look forward to working with you on those. So just to go over the grant program, right now we're in that grant period. There'll be question time up until a few days before November 30th. I don't have the date in front of me. But basically, you can continue to submit your questions to me. We are really encouraging municipalities to apply by November 30th. That said, if you can't reach that deadline, please shoot me an email or give me a call. Let me know it's coming. We do anticipate this being a competitive program, and we want to ensure we have a very diverse array of funding, funding implementation projects across the region. So we wouldn't want you to preclude just because November 30th is a tricky deadline. We understand with Thanksgiving and all of that. We intend to once we have a handful of submissions on or around November 30th, we do have a technical team here at MAPC that will be reviewing applications and proposals and sort of evaluating the criteria related to our program priority areas. And that said, we do want this to be relatively simple for municipalities. So don't feel like you need to send 5 pages of a program description or project description. Succinct is great. We wanted to give you the flexibility of putting more in and not limit you to a word count, but again, don't feel like this is a major narrative. We want it to be a relatively easy lift. So we intend to make award announcements in December. Like I said, we'll have a quick turnaround. Our proposals will be reviewed by our technical team, and final decisions will be made by the Executive Director, Mark Drazen. And then we will let you know as soon as we know, which will be hopefully in December, and then we're going to work in January to turn around a grant agreement. So if you've worked with MAPC before, it's going to be very similar to our typical contracts. What we would do is attach your scope of work. We may do some fleshing out with the municipalities just to ensure that your projects can be achieved in that timeline and help you flesh some of those projects out before we go into contract. I wanted to also just mention your proposals can be to hire a consultant, or if you're looking for MAPC to do technical assistance for you related to these projects, we're happy to do that. So in the sense that you might want to look to get engineering studies done or designer, we obviously don't have landscape architects on staff, but if you're looking for technical assistance, for example, on advancing climate justice for vulnerable populations in areas where extreme heat or climate change, MAPC has a lot of expertise and can help you with that. So once we have our grant agreement, we hope that you'll all be ready to get moving forward. By mid-June, we'll be looking for a progress report. This will be very simple. It's going to be a few questions, largely about what you've done to date, money that you've spent. If you're looking to get some portion of your grant funds to you by mid-June, we can do that after we've accepted your progress report. And this is also an opportunity if you found that you need to renegotiate your scope of work, or if you need some additional assistance, things of that nature, that's in our sort of check-in point. So we just want to know that we're supporting you, that things are moving along the way. And again, if you are looking for some funds from this grant program, we can reimburse you proportionate to the amount of work that you've completed. So, and we would plan on disposing those in July. So my intent is hopefully to do some site visits in December prior to your final report. We do look forward to taking pictures and seeing all the great work that you're doing. And also our intent is to ensure that we can continue to have this grant program. So we want to show that it's really a viable program and that's making a difference. And so having photos of all you great staff standing by your projects underway is definitely something we want to document. May not come to everybody's project, but we'll certainly select a few where it's appropriate. And if there are times when it's more appropriate for me to take a picture, for example, you're planting trees in September, then please do let me know. So in December, all projects need to be completed by December 2019. We actually don't have a lot of flexibility on that, so we do want to encourage applicants to be very cautious in what you're committing to in your project scope. And we will be looking for a final report at the end of December. So these are a little bit more, this will be a little bit heavier, but not much. Again, we don't want this to be burdensome for our municipalities. We want to just help you move on your way towards resiliency. So again, just looking to what you accomplished, why it was important to you, and also to understand if there are other things that we need to know to make this program a better success or can provide more support for our next grant round. So, and then we'll anticipate dispersing the remaining funds or all of your funds, depending on how you choose, in January 2019. And see, then the sun will shine and you'll be climate resilient. Just want to go over our program priority areas. The proposals do need to address at least one of these, and this is important. And then we'll talk about these in a little bit more detail. So we're looking to really advance nature-based solutions for climate resilience, such as green infrastructure. I can't see what that says. Low-impact development, climate-smart parks, urban forestry, carbon trading efforts using green infrastructure, eco-roofs, and rain gardens. These are just some examples. We're looking also to advance some municipal climate resiliency regulations, zoning, financing, or infrastructure. So this is really a pretty broad category, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about that. But just some examples quickly. You want to review your wetlands bylaw to ensure you're looking at future flooding and making important decisions around that. Maybe having a green infrastructure overlay district or changing the regulations around building and high energy areas or areas that are prone to flooding. Also, what are some innovative financing strategies that you might be able to look for some technical assistance to help your municipality pay for some of the infrastructure that is required? And also infrastructure, just ways in which we can make municipal buildings or other infrastructure, bridges, culverts, sidewalks, et cetera, more climate resilient. So climate coalitions or convenings, there are some existing ones already, so we want to look for ways to support those efforts, such as the ones in the Mystic River watershed. There's the Neponset River Stormwater Partnership. The Charles River is doing some work. Mystic River is doing, the Charles River, Neponset, I got the three major ones. But also just there's a Magic Climate Region that did a climate resiliency planning. So, and there's a newly formed South Shore Coalition. So whether you want to create a coalition, such as a stormwater partnership, so you can collectively plan and collaborate on managing your MS4, we can certainly help you with that. We have evidence of that in the North Shore, for example. There might be interest and you need some funding. So that's one to take a look at. So improvements to social resiliency or community cohesion, this can just be through dialogues, gatherings, and networks, but we're particularly looking for those populations that are at the greatest risk to climate change. And if you're not sure who those folks are, MAPC can certainly help you with that. And there's a lot of data and tools that can help you identify. Okay, sorry I'm like stuck on this. There we go. So synergies between climate adaptation and mitigation or other multiple benefits. So this is a case where we're really looking for resiliency in a way that's more adaptation-based, but we love making these connections towards that. So for example, if you were building a LEED energy municipal building, and this funding could look to enhance making it a net zero, not only a net zero building, but also a net zero water, a net blue, I can't remember what it's called, net zero for water. So you're having like 100% water reuse on site with green infrastructure. So those are some of the ways that we can align mitigation and adaptation projects together. If some of your projects come in where you're looking to really promote walking and biking as a way of getting people out of their cars, particularly like around safe walks to school or other community assets, and that this project would help really enhance both of your mitigation and adaptation efforts, we would really like to see that happen. So I want to be specific. We aren't just looking to, it needs to be more than just a clean energy project. So it has to include some kind of component of adaptation, but certainly we welcome aligning those two together. We certainly are excited about that. Local food systems or community agriculture, I'll talk more about that. District scale pilots that accelerate climate resiliency, I will go into that a little bit more as well, but really we're looking at whatever you want to define as your district, but largely these are smaller scale neighborhood or community type projects. And then public outreach, marketing, or arts and culture projects that advance climate change knowledge or action. So I'll go into some examples there, but I think we can allow for some flexibility on that and what your ideas on that. It could be, well, we'll go into more detail on those. So the first one I wanted to talk about was Program Area 1, which is Advancing Nature-Based Solutions. So I gave a couple of examples here. So for example, the City of Boston is doing improvements to Flaherty Park. They have a budget, they have a plan, but this project might, if they were to receive funding, might be able to plant some extra trees, create some rain gardens, do additional green infrastructure to manage the stormwater, flooding, or urban heat island effect in that park. So if you have a park project underway and you're looking to advance it to make it more climate smart, this is a great opportunity. Ecological restoration projects that potentially need more funding. This is Broad Cove. It's a site in Hingham. It's a project with the Division of Ecological Restoration. It's working on affecting 45 acres of degraded coastal pond and salt marsh habitats due to an undersized culvert and water-controlled tide gate structure. So we often understand that many of these projects go over budget or are underfunded. So if we can help leverage some additional work that'll advance that resiliency, that's another example. So municipal resiliency, zoning, regulations, and innovative financing. So I wanted to just provide two examples here. One is in San Francisco, their Better Roofs program. So this is where all new and reconstruction requires 30% of the roof space to be either a green roof or with solar or both. And I think it'd be really interesting to explore that type of work here in the metropolitan area. So we're not asking you necessarily to implement it, but to look for the technical assistance to help find and figure out the ways and the avenues in which you could implement something like that into the future, which of course would also include some community participation. So new mechanisms for resiliency financing, certainly not my area of expertise, but I did want to bring forth something that I did learn about recently in Fort Lauderdale, where they're looking at working with communities on the maintenance and restoration of their seawalls. So that becomes another kind of example of this. So whereas the residents who have seawalls or neighborhoods where seawalls protect neighborhoods, those residents also provide funding towards, or are responsible, have some responsibility towards the maintenance and restoration of those seawalls in cooperation with the municipality. Other ways that we could look at business improvement districts are already secured by an enabling regulation in Massachusetts. So one of the things we're trying to think about is can we start to think about coastal business improvement districts where you have businesses along your waterfronts that are prone to flooding today, where you can do coastal business improvements that would provide funding not only for public programming, but also potentially enhancements for resiliency. So again, this would be more of a planning effort towards taking your initial planning efforts and one step further on how to implement some of these. Climate coalitions and convenings, I did start to talk a little bit about that. I gave the two examples of Neponset Stormwater Partnership. They have a great website. I encourage you to explore it. And also the Magic Climate Resilience communities. In the metropolitan Boston region, is there an opportunity for the communities to collaborate on advancing and doing some of the implementation work of that recently completed plan? If you have an existing climate partnership and you want to bring people together to really start to plan and advance and strategize around your climate resiliency as a region, we would also look to support convening a large event, for example. Accelerating climate resiliency. So wanted to also mention that emergency management is a component of climate resiliency with your communities as well. And so want to also encourage you to think about that. We understand with the communities we worked with through their MVP process that emergency management and communications to the public is a really important consideration. So, for example, we were just with Newton, the city of Newton, and one of their components was just translating all of their communications into some of the top languages that are spoken in that city aside from English. So that included Spanish and Portuguese, and I think there was one other. So, and so here's an example of emergency agencies on the left turn to telephone translators for bilingual response. So that way you're ensuring you're reaching everyone in your community. So here on the right, you have a screenshot of the Commonwealth's Resilient Mass website, which provides indicators of climate vulnerability for the Commonwealth. If you don't have an MVP plan or a climate vulnerability assessment plan, or you don't have information just yet on where those communities are, where they're in a project neighborhood for greater social vulnerability, you can go to resilientma.org. This is what you're looking at is the environmental justice populations, or you can work with MAPC to help you identify those folks, where they're living and what kind of services they need to provide. So looking at those targeted neighborhoods, here we're in Natick, I believe, or Framingham, I'm sorry, I can't see, Framingham, excuse me. And so these are some of those areas that you might want to target if you were really trying to advance social resiliency or community cohesion. So big stars to anyone who comes and implements a project like this from the Netherlands. Vertical forest skyscraper covered in 5,000 plants with apartments that cost less than $900 a month. Wouldn't that be just a dream? So that's like kind of where we're looking at creating some of those synergies between resilient infrastructure and green infrastructure, so the climate adaptation and mitigation. So here, the plants are going to manage water, they're going to mitigate air quality, also provide affordable housing. It's sort of like one of those dream projects that $50,000 doesn't come near to funding. But that's the kind of example we wanted just to give you, spark some ideas. So local food systems or community agriculture resiliency. So there's a lot of flexibility here, and we literally look forward to your ideas. So for some communities, creating a right to farm bylaw is a start, and that way you're enabling local food systems to remain secure and food access to remain secure in the face of climate change. You can start an urban agriculture initiative, so a right to farm bylaw is typically found in more suburban communities, urban agriculture district overlays in some more urban communities. That takes a lot of community engagement, and so this program would support something like that. Or if you have those in place, looking to work with your communities or your residents or your community-based partners to build an urban farm. But also, agriculture expands, and I think this is one concern that is raising more to my awareness is commercial fishermen and what is the future of the commercial fishing industry in Massachusetts look like with climate change, with threats of warming ocean temperatures and ocean acidification, but also just the access points for our fishermen to get to the water. So what is that actual infrastructure looking like? So having some of the conversations with local commercial fishermen. Also, it's possible for communities to set up initiatives that will help support your farmers do resiliency measures around climate change, so working around workshops or infrastructure around changing crop rotations that are more adaptive for crops that are more adaptable to climate change, irrigation infrastructure. We look to your creativity on this one. So district-scale pilots that accelerate climate resilience. Duxbury, I do apologize that I'm picking on you here, but I think this was really fun to create this photo. So this is Snug Harbor in Duxbury. It's a commercial district, really a hub of recreation and business for the community. And as you can see, it's at risk to flooding today, but also in 2070. So is there a way that we can work with some of these communities? And there are many business districts like this in the metropolitan Boston area. So I'm using this as an example, but one that I think is replicable across our region, to start working with those stakeholders. Who are the businesses? Who are the residents? Who are the users of those places? And what is the plan for managing sea level rise or flooding today or flooding into the future? And how do we start to slowly create incremental steps to making that area really resilient, where these are economy-based neighborhoods? Doesn't have to be a business district. It could be a neighborhood district, and Boston has a few examples for East Boston, for example, and I think they just completed one in South Boston. You can look on the Climate Ready website to take a look at that. So public engagement, again, I think this is where we look towards your creativity on this. I think one of my, exciting things that I'm trying to promote here at MAPC is really integrating arts and culture into bringing people together around awareness for climate change, and social cohesion is a really key component of climate resiliency. So here's an example by our artist and residence, Carolyn Lewinberg, where she worked on the Strand Trail in Everett, worked with the Everett community growers, the municipality, the city of Everett, planners and others, and the community to create an artistic structure along the greenway that actually absorbs stormwater and grows food. So that's one way that you can think about using arts to bring people together and actually function as a resiliency measure. Another is idea, again, we're trying to be sort of broad-based, but to create an emergency response volunteer group or communication systems. Again, this is something that has come up over and over in some of our municipalities we've worked with on MVP. And the Situate SANS, is Situate Alliance for Natural Disaster Services, is an excellent example of a community-based organization that's volunteer-run, and they help provide disaster relief and information prior, during, and with post-recovery. And on the off seasons, they also connect some of the teenagers who have volunteer requirements to some of the seniors to help with shoveling, or alerts and awareness to some of the seniors on days of extreme heat, and and with residents, for example, businesses, for example, to encourage seniors who might be more vulnerable to extreme heat to the Council on Aging, where businesses have provided free lunch and movies for them. So here are just some special tips. I'm sure there's probably more. Climate change crosses sectors, boundaries, and departments, and we encourage your creativity and just to ensure that you're really looking at this from a more integrated approach. So working with your Public Works Department and your Housing Authority and your Health Department, and also with your leadership and planning to make this project a reality. We do encourage creative proposals. If you don't have one that specifically aligns our program priority areas, it's certainly our preference that you're meeting one of those, but we will evaluate others. We do want to make sure that the project enhances resiliency in some form, but it's pretty broad in how that you could accomplish that. We do really love projects that prioritize equity and social vulnerability. We also really love projects that enhance regional collaboration or a regional resilience strategy. It's also possible that you described how your small project fits into a bigger plan, and so that's really what we're trying to replicate here. Is this mini grant program really going to leverage something larger? And if so, describe that. If it's not, it's okay as well. If your project budget is larger than the award amount, so these are grants for $15,000 to $50,000, please indicate the total project budget and let us know if you're looking for additional project funding that you might seek. For example, I know that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, if you're an MVP community, has mentioned they will be releasing another grant round in late December, so we've talked about how their grant could be matching grants to ours for making projects larger. In the unlikely event that we don't have enough projects to fund, we may consider providing the remainder of your budget. It's not likely we'll have extra money, but if we do, it's important to at least lay out all of the budget, the funding that you need to complete it. We definitely want to see proposals that demonstrate implementation of a plan. This is a really exciting opportunity, and as a planning agency, we're really looking to help our communities do more implementation work and really accelerate climate resiliency. So at this point, I'd love to talk about your proposed projects. I am collecting questions as I get them, and am able to. I'm documenting them and putting all those questions on the website with the date that I received them. So you'll get an update this week. There should be another one coming up, and we'll also document questions that have come up during this webinar. You can also just shoot me an email, shoot me a phone call. If you have questions, you want to vet your project, that's what I'm here for, and I'd love to talk it through you. We want, again, this to be a relatively easy lift for you all, and we want you to be successful. So that's what we're here for. So at this point, I would love to take some of your questions, and what I will do is stop sharing my, and start to look at some of the questions that we have here. I'll take them. I can see now that some of you lost your audio. I apologize about that. So I have a question. If municipalities and nonprofits are submitting a proposal together, can one of the nonprofits act as a lead? And I would say absolutely. I think we would encourage that. However, the municipality needs to be the applicant and the funding needs to flow through them. But if the nonprofit is doing the majority of the heavy lifting, that's completely acceptable, and we certainly encourage and understand that that is sometimes how these things have to work. So the next question, what would you like to see in terms of supporting documentation? I do believe in our, in the proposal form, we are asking that we have a designated project manager and support from your chief officer, executive officer, so whether it's your mayor, your town manager, your town administrator, the board of selectmen, I think we could be flexible on those. If you are looking to actually build something, we would want to see that you have taken steps already to advance getting some of those permits in line. So that may be that you have your designs already completed and you're scheduled for the Conservation Commission this date. That's one indicator that you're showing some project readiness and advancing some of the work. So the permitting, I think, is important. Project documentation, that I think we would want to understand your ability to complete this in 12 months. So that would be anything related to that. Please do send all of that permitting information. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to have them in place, but that you are advancing on that, and you can demonstrate that you will secure them in a short period of time. Other forms of documentation, nothing is coming to mind. I'm going to check with Katie. I'm sorry?
Timeline and budget, the project description, that's the main one.
Yeah, so just along the lines with the project budget, your timeline, and just your project description. I think we're good with that. If you are planning to hire a consultant, it might be helpful to have that quote for the scope of work that you're doing, but it's not necessarily, you don't necessarily need to know who your consultant might be. Okay. I don't see any other questions. Anyone? Anyone want to vet a project with me? Okay, I'm hearing silence. Ooh, I see a dot. Oh, good, okay. Another question came in. We at Newton were thinking about submitting a proposal for the creation of a climate resource center for educational materials. How does that sound? Well, I'm looking at Tammy. She's shaking her head yes, so I'd say that sounds great. No, that's exactly the type of public outreach and engagement that we would like to see. Another question that I get pretty frequently is that municipalities are asking whether they can submit more than one application. We do want to reinforce that as a yes. It needs to be for 2 different projects, but if you're feeling like you have a lot of projects, not sure which one is the best one to submit them all, or whatever you have the capacity to complete, we will potentially award more than one project for a municipality. Generally, we want them in different either subject matters or geographic locations, but more than likely both. So there's this Q&A section. Oh, okay. Great, we have another question coming in. We would love to have 2 towns working together is awesome. Please do, yay, very exciting. What I would suggest is just 1 town is the lead applicant that would be managing the contract and the finances, but we would love it if 2 towns work together or more. If you have a regional partnership opportunity, like the Neponset Stormwater Partnership or the Magic Region, we would certainly want to have a lead applicant, but we would, it's feasible to divide that funding into different municipalities. So we do want to encourage that and demonstrate that you're collaborating in some form. Okay, we have another question. Would a small salt marsh restoration project adjacent to an eroded roadway be a viable project to help stabilize the road? I would say absolutely. That's definitely a project we would love to see. I think the one thing that we would want to just be cautious of is all of the permitting associated with that. If you have to evaluate Chapter 91, not knowing where your project's from, certainly you have to go through Conservation Commission and things of that nature, but that's an exciting project we'd love to see. So just want to, okay, we have a, I just want to check, can people respond that if you've put in a question that I've answered it, or if that I haven't seen one? Or I guess, how about this? If you put a question in the Q&A, just use the chat so that I can see it, because I'm having a difficulty getting to that panel. Would there be partial grants less than asked for? Sure, we could do that. I've never been asked that question before.
Or I think you might be asking, would we award less than they ask for?
Yeah.
And I think that is, that is possible.
Sure.
Depending on how competitive it is. The budgets will help us understand what all the asks are for.
So, okay, not received. Okay, so I'm going to have to try. So for those of you who submitted questions that I haven't, so Martha and John, can you use the chat box to submit them, and then I'll address them, because I did not receive them. Okay. If we're looking to get an independent gas safety audit completed for the aging gas infrastructure in Weston, where we have over 140 unrepaired leaks emitting methane into the atmosphere, is this a project you would consider? I think that kind of falls into the category of being more of a climate mitigation. It certainly is extraordinarily important, but I think if you were also to include a tree planting plan to help mitigate some of those emissions, then that would make it a little bit more viable. Question, can a non-member community partner in with a member of MAPC, aka Marshfield? So yeah, I think what I had suggested, what I've mentioned, is that if there is a community outside of the MAPC region that you want to work with, because water and climate change doesn't cross boundaries, but you have a great collaboration, we can support that. The MAPC community needs to be the lead applicant. Okay. Our initial idea is to apply for funding for a consultant to design a rain garden and other green infrastructure for a parking lot in the center of town that regularly floods. Are we on the right track? Absolutely. John, did you send your questions again? I can't open this up for some reason. That's, I think, for me to ask questions, so.
Why can't do the Q&A?
Okay, are there criteria, this is from John, are there criteria involving equitable distributions of funds? Okay, I'm gonna have to open this up. Sorry, y'all, you're gonna see my, for instance, are you taking into account MVP grants or local fiscal resources? John, I'm not sure I understand what you're asking me there. The way you can put it in the chat box, or I can follow up with you afterwards as well. Koi might not get funded. I don't know, it might. You could, if we could eat algae, I don't know, it could work. Oh, I think I understand, John, your question now. So, for example, I think what you're asking me is that whether larger communities with greater population might get more funding or smaller, that our funding would be proportionate to the size of the municipality, similarly how MVP is. Is that what your question? Yes, okay. I don't think we really considered weighting the funds. I think it's really more of a project base. So I think we really just want to help all of our communities achieve their projects. So I would say no. The answer to that is no. We wouldn't weight it necessarily, but we want to try and provide as much funding to complete your project as we can. Okay, I think I found it. Okay, Liz Steele, if you're on the phone. I can't, oh, there we go, okay, here we go. All right, so sorry about that. How do we put a price on hiring an engineer for stormwater study if we don't know what it will be at this time? Yeah, I mean, I would suggest just, you know, it is possible just to do a quick request for interest. I know municipalities have done that to try and get a sense of what they could do with that scope of work. Alternatively, you can request a certain amount of money, say $25,000, and then hire your consultant to complete the scope of work for that amount of funds, and that often works. Okay, I think I answered that one. Criteria, okay. Answered that one, that's John. I saw one. Okay, so Liz, you responded about, it is a creative interpretation of resiliency. Okay, I see what you're saying. I mean, I'm not arguing whether this is an important resiliency project. I absolutely agree with you. I think what we're trying to do is really get more adaptation type components involved in that. So as I mentioned, this is going back to the independent gas safety audit. I mean, it's a huge issue, obviously, concerning people's safety, emergency response. So I think if you can make this, make the story a little bit broader on how it would advance your resiliency so it's not just specifically about energy, I think that would really help your application. These are great questions, all of you. Marshfield's still part of the MAPC region, so that definitely would work, Valerie. And we would love to have a joint application from Duxbury and Marshfield. You should look in the chat now. Yes, so for Martha, as part of the TA, could MAPC provide names of design engineers who specialize in green infrastructure? Absolutely. I mean, I can, and Martha, if you want, we can just have a conversation offline if you want me to provide that, or I can talk to you about some of the folks that I've worked with that have experience in that. So question is, I missed the start of the call. Are you able to share the presentation and key links to the application process? Yes, so if technology has been, knock on wood, working so far. I've recorded this WebEx, so we will, I will work with our team to get this on the website, which is accelerating climate, www.mapc.org. If you type in accelerating resiliency, you'll get to the web page with all of the information. Also, you can email me if you can't find it, and I will send that to you. But our hope is that you'll be able to view this webinar online. Well, we'll just wait 1 or 2 more minutes for more questions, but I want to say I'm really can't wait to see your proposals and your projects. We're really excited about this program, excuse me. And we really hope that we can demonstrate this as a viable opportunity for our municipalities so that we can do this again next year. We look forward to your creativity. We look forward to working with you and supporting you. And please do reach out to me at any time if you have any questions, and I will type in the chat my contact information. There we go, thank you. I think I got another question here, no? Oh, I got an email. Oh, yes, so I will, to Bridget, I'm sorry that you didn't have any audio. I apologize for that. But yes, you will have the webinar online. Oh my goodness. There's the web page where on our website where you can find all the information you need. Okay, so I think we will end the webinar. And again, if you feel free to email me if you have any questions or give me a call. I'll do my best to respond to you within 24 hours, hopefully sooner than that. And I'm seeing that we are starting to lose participants. So unless there are any final questions, I'm glad this is helpful. Thank you, Meredith.